B. You have been manipulated today. Not yesterday, not last week, today. And the worst part is you smiled through it, nodded along, maybe even felt grateful afterward. That is not weakness. That is something far more dangerous. That is conditioning, and by the end of this, you're going to see it so clearly that you will never be able to unsee it. Most people go their entire lives never realizing that the way they respond to the world is not their own. Their reactions, their choices, their need to be liked, their fear of conflict, all of it was installed in them by other people, by parents, by social environments, by partners who needed them small, by bosses who needed them compliant, by friends who needed them available. The manipulation did not happen in dark rooms with sinister intentions. It happened over breakfast, in group chats, in conversations that felt completely normal. That is the genius of it. The most effective manipulation never looks like manipulation. It looks like love, it looks like loyalty, it looks like just the way things are. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this at a level most people are not willing to confront. He did not write about power because he was evil. He wrote about power because he was honest. He looked at human nature without flinching and described exactly what he saw. People are moved by fear and desire. People project, people use. People perform loyalty until loyalty is no longer convenient. And the ones who survive, the ones who actually build something real and lasting, are the ones who understand this not as cynicism but as clarity. So this is not a video about becoming cold. This is a video about becoming clear. Because right now, without clarity, you are a walking target. Think about the last time someone made you feel guilty for something that was actually their problem. Think about the last time you held back your real opinion because you were afraid of how it would land. Think about the last time you worked harder, stayed longer, gave more, not because you wanted to, but because you were terrified of what would happen if you did not. Every one of those moments was a transfer of power, and you handed it over willingly. Here is what they never tell you. The people who manipulate you most effectively are almost never doing it consciously. They are not sitting in a corner plotting. They learned long ago that certain behaviors get them what they want, and they simply never stopped using them. The guilt trip that your mother uses on you, she did not invent that. It was used on her. She learned that emotions could move people, and she kept that tool. The colleague who takes credit for your ideas, he is not a villain. He simply learned that asserting ownership over things gives him status, and nobody ever stopped him. The partner who makes you feel like too much whenever you express a need, she is not trying to break you. She is protecting herself the only way she knows how, which happens to involve making you disappear. Understanding this does not mean you excuse it. It means you stop being surprised by it. And the moment you stop being surprised, you stop being controlled. The first behavior that makes you impossible to manipulate is the complete elimination of the need for approval. Not the reduction of it, the elimination, because most people think they have already handled this. Most people believe they do not care what others think, and then someone they respect raises an eyebrow and their entire internal world shifts. Their tone changes, their posture changes. They start justifying and explaining and performing, all within seconds without even noticing. The need for approval is the single greatest lever that exists in human psychology. It is what makes grown adults shrink in conversations. It is what makes intelligent people accept bad deals because they cannot bear the discomfort of someone being disappointed in them. Machiavelli wrote that a man who relies on the goodwill of others will be ruined, because goodwill is temporary and conditional and always subject to the interests of the person giving it. You are not entitled to anyone's approval. You never were. And the moment you stopped earning it at every interaction, something terrifying happens. You become unpredictable, and unpredictable people cannot be controlled. This is why the most powerful people in any room tend to share one quality. They are genuinely comfortable with disapproval, not performing comfort, actually comfortable. They can hold a position, receive pushback, watch someone's expression fall, and stay exactly where they are. They do not rush to soften the blow. They do not over-explain. They say what they mean and then they let it exist in the air without apology. That stillness is not arrogance. It is a signal. It tells every observant person in the room that this individual cannot be moved by social pressure. And that one signal changes everything about how they are treated. You want to build this not overnight, but systematically. You start by catching yourself in the moment of seeking approval, not after. In the moment, watch how quickly your body moves toward explanation when someone is silent. Watch how fast you add qualifiers to statements that needed none. Watch how instinctively you check faces after you speak. You are not doing this because you are weak. You're doing this because it was once necessary. In early environments where being accepted was survival, approval seeking kept you safe, but you are not in that environment anymore. You are carrying a strategy from a past battlefield into a present where it is costing you everything. The second behavior that separates the manipulated from the unmovable is emotional non-reactivity. And before you misunderstand this, it is not suppression, it is not coldness. It is the ability to feel without being hijacked. Your emotions are real, they are valid, they are also the most exploited vulnerability you possess. Every manipulator, conscious or not, eventually learns your emotional patterns. They learn what makes you defensive, what makes you guilty, what makes you desperate to fix things, to smooth things over, to bring the temperature back down. And once they know that they own you, they can trigger you at will. They can create the exact internal state that makes you compliant, and then make their ask when you're in that state. And you will believe that whatever you did was your own choice. The way you become emotionally non-reactive is not by suppressing what you feel, it is by creating a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is everything. In that gap lives your power. Most people have no gap. Something happens and they react before they have even consciously processed what happened. Someone raises their voice and the nervous system floods with cortisol and the mouth opens, and the damage is done before the mind even arrived at the scene. This is what manipulation depends on. It depends on your autopilot. It needs you to react before you think, because if you think before you react, the manipulation fails every time. Machiavelli understood that the prince who could not control his responses would be controlled by those who understood his responses. He watched rulers fall not because they were outsmarted, but because they were out-emotioned. They were provoked into anger and made decisions from rage. They were seduced into trust and made decisions from warmth. They were threatened into fear and made decisions from panic. Every one of those decisions served someone else's interest. When someone does something that triggers a reaction in you, and you want to respond immediately, that impulse itself is the manipulation completing its cycle. The response they need from you is the product they are harvesting. Withhold it, and you take the power back. Say nothing. Let the silence exist. Let them be uncomfortable in it. You will discover very quickly how much of human manipulation relies on your cooperation, your urgency to resolve the tension, your need to make things okay. When you stop needing to make things okay, you become genuinely formidable. The third behavior is brutal clarity about people's actual motives, not their stated motives, their actual motives, and this is where most kind-hearted, emotionally intelligent people completely collapse, because they have been taught that assuming bad intent makes you a bad person. They have been told that charity of interpretation is a virtue, and it can be, in the right contexts, with the right people, in the right situations. But extended universally to everyone in every situation, it becomes a sophisticated form of self-deception that keeps you permanently available for exploitation. Machiavelli's entire political philosophy rested on one foundational principle: judge people by what they do, not by what they say, not what they claim, not what they intend, not what they feel guilty about later, what they actually do consistently over time when it costs them something to keep their word. Because words are free. Words are the cheapest currency available to human beings. Anyone can tell you that they value you, that they respect you, that they have your best interest at heart. The question is what their behavior says when those two things are in conflict. When keeping their promise to you would cost them something they want more, what do they choose? That choice tells you everything. That choice is the only data that matters. You have people in your life right now whose behavior has told you exactly who they are, and you are still arguing with that data because the words they use are so convincing, or because the love you feel for them overrides the pattern recognition your brain has been performing for years. You know someone who only calls when they need something. You know someone who becomes suddenly enthusiastic about your plans right up until your success would require some sacrifice from them. You know someone who cannot tolerate your confidence and subtly undermines it in ways that always sound like concern. You know these people, you see the pattern, you just have not been willing to act on that knowledge because acting on it would require you to lose something. And that attachment to what you stand to lose is itself another layer of manipulation. Start treating people's behavior as their actual communication. When someone cancels on you for the fourth time, that is not a coincidence of circumstances, that is a revelation of priorities. When someone talks over you in every conversation, that is not social awkwardness, that is a power structure they have decided exists. When someone's mood controls the entire room and everyone around them makes constant micro-adjustments to prevent the explosion, that is not sensitivity, that is dominance. Benevolence seeming unconscious perhaps, but dominance nonetheless. See it clearly, name it to yourself clearly, then decide how you want to respond to the actual situation. Not the situation that should exist if everyone were acting with pure intentions. The fourth behavior is the disciplined protection of your time, your attention, and your interiority. Manipulators, and again, most of them are not conscious manipulators, depend on access. They need consistent access to you, your emotional state, your availability, your responsiveness, because they are not actually after your time. They are after the influence that comes from constant contact. The more someone can reach you, interrupt you, pull your attention toward them and their needs and their emotional weather, the more leverage they accumulate over your internal world without you ever granting it explicitly. Think about the people in your life who contact you most frequently. Now ask yourself whether that frequency reflects genuine connection or whether it reflects a need for constant position monitoring. Whether they reach out to give or to check. Whether the conversations leave you energized or slowly depleted. Whether you feel like yourself after those interactions or slightly less certain of yourself, slightly more anxious, slightly more focused on them and their needs and less connected to your own direction. Machiavelli wrote that a wise prince must know how to use both the lion and the fox, the lion for force and the fox for cunning. But before either of those strategies can work, the prince must first know his own territory. And your internal world is your territory. Your attention is the most valuable resource you own, every moment of it that goes to managing someone else's emotions, performing for someone else's comfort, or monitoring someone else's reactions is a moment that is not yours. Multiply that across a week, a month, a year, and you begin to understand not just how manipulation operates, but how an entire life can be quietly redirected without a single dramatic moment, simply through the accumulation of small surrenders of attention. Protect your interiority ferociously, not rudely, not with walls that prevent genuine connection, but with a clear, unwavering sense of what you are willing to give, to whom, under what circumstances and why. The people who deserve your full presence will respect its limits. The people who react with guilt or anger or passive withdrawal when you establish those limits are precisely the people those limits are necessary for. The fifth behavior is one that will feel almost counterintuitive given everything culture has told you about relationships and community. It is the deliberate cultivation of independence, real independence, financial where possible, emotional where essential, the kind of independence that means no single person, no single relationship, no single institution has the power to destabilize your entire life by withdrawing. Here is the brutal truth that Machiavelli saw more clearly than almost any political philosopher of his era. The person who needs you cannot control you. The person you need completely owns you. This is not romantic cynicism. This is the fundamental power geometry of every human relationship that has ever existed. The moment another person can threaten your security, your self-image, your social standing, or your income by simply withdrawing their approval or their presence, you have handed them unconditional leverage over your behavior. You will not even experience it as control. You will experience it as love, as respect, as just being a good friend, a loyal employee, a devoted partner. You will experience the cage as comfort, because it was built slowly, brick by brick, and each brick felt like connection. Real independence is not isolation. It is optionality. It is the psychological reality of knowing that if this relationship ended, if this job disappeared, if this person withdrew, you would grieve perhaps, but you would not collapse. You have other anchors. You have other sources of meaning, of income, of connection, of identity. The more diverse your anchors, the less any single one of them can be used against you. Start building this with intention. Not as a defense mechanism, but as an expansion of your life. More skills, more genuine relationships, more financial pathways, more sources of self-worth that exist entirely within you and require nothing from outside to remain intact. Every month you spend building this infrastructure makes you marginally harder to manipulate, until eventually the leverage that others once held over you simply does not exist anymore, not because you became hard, but because you became whole. The sixth behavior is the one that ties everything together, and it is the one that most people find the hardest to accept because it sounds on the surface like arrogance. It is the unconditional refusal to justify yourself to people who are not entitled to your justification. You have spent an enormous amount of energy explaining yourself to people who were never actually confused, who never needed the explanation to understand. They needed the explanation as a performance of your submission. When you explain yourself excessively, when you over-justify your decisions, your choices, your boundaries, your needs, you are not clarifying. You're apologizing for existing in a way that inconvenienced someone else. And every time you do that, you teach every person in your life that they are entitled to that apology, that the natural order of things involves them questioning you and you proving your reasonableness to their satisfaction. Machiavelli was absolutely ruthless on this point. He understood that the prince who justifies every decision to every faction quickly becomes a ruler in name only, because the actual authority has been distributed to the court of public opinion, and those people will never be satisfied. Give them one justification, and they will require to satisfy two objections, and three more will appear. This is not because people are malicious, it is because justification creates hierarchy. It places the person seeking justification above the person providing it, and once that hierarchy is established, it calcifies incredibly fast. The alternative is not hostility, it is not silent stonewalling, it is simply the settled confidence of a person who makes decisions based on their own values and reasoning and does not require external validation for those decisions to stand. It is the quiet acknowledgement that you heard someone's concern followed by the unchanged position. It is the ability to say no without a paragraph of reasoning that gives them material to argue against. It is the comfort with being misunderstood by people who are not actually trying to understand you. This is the level of psychological security that the most powerful, most grounded, most impossible to manipulate people you have ever met operate from. It is not built from ego. It is built from a relationship with yourself that is so solid, so clearly defined, so continuously reinforced by your own behavior in alignment with your own values, that the opinions of others simply do not have the structural foothold they once did. There is no crack for the crowbar to enter. Now think about where you actually are, not where you aspire to be, where you actually are right now in each of these dimensions. The approval seeking that is still automatic, the emotional reactions that are still instant, the people whose behavior you are still reading charitably against a mountain of contradicting evidence, the attention that is still scattered and endlessly available, the dependencies that still make certain losses feel unsurvivable, the justifications you are still offering, still crafting, still refining for audiences who will never be truly satisfied. This is not an attack, this is a mirror. And the reason it is uncomfortable is not because any of it is unfair. It is because it is precise and precision about yourself, about your patterns, about the ways you have been running the same losing strategies on a loop for years, is the beginning of actual change. Most self-improvement content keeps things comfortable. It tells you that you are great, that you just need small tweaks, that with enough positive thinking and the right morning routine, transformation will arrive gently, and you consume it and feel briefly better and continue doing exactly what you have always done, because that content was designed to make you feel understood without making you feel responsible. It gave you insight without accountability. That is its own form of manipulation, the manipulation of easy comfort. This is different. This is the kind of knowledge that creates a before and after in a person's life. Not because you read it, because if you have understood what is being said here, you cannot now pretend you did not see it. You have been handed a lens, and that lens is now installed. Every interaction you have from this point forward will be filtered through it. Every guilt trip will register differently. Every excessive explanation you begin to offer will be noticed by something in you before it is finished. Every time you feel that pull toward seeking approval, some part of your awareness will name it, and the naming begins the dissolving. Machiavelli believed that knowledge of how power actually works was the only real protection against it. Not innocence, not goodness alone, not trusting that the world will treat you fairly if you behave well enough. Knowledge, practical, clear-eyed, unflinching knowledge of human nature and the ways it operates in the environments you actually inhabit. The people who will try to manipulate you are not going to stop. That is the part no one wants to say clearly. They are going to keep trying because the strategies work, because they have always worked, because you and everyone around you kept rewarding those strategies with compliance. They are not going to transform, they are not going to apologize, and then permanently change the behavior. Some of them might occasionally when the cost is low, but the pattern will return because the pattern was never really about you. It was never personal. You were just the most available, most responsive, most rewarding target at the time. What changes is not them. What changes is the return they get from trying, because when the approval seeking is gone, the guilt trip lands nowhere. When the emotional reactivity is gone, the provocation achieves nothing. When the clarity about motives is real, the performance of intention fools no one. When the access is protected, the influence that comes from constant contact evaporates. When the independence is built, the threat of withdrawal loses its teeth. When the justification reflex is silenced, the entitled questioning finds no foothold. You become, in the most precise sense of the word, untouchable. Not because no one can touch you emotionally. You will still feel, you will still care, you will still be moved by people and ideas and moments, but no one will be able to use those feelings against you, because you will see the attempt before it reaches you, and you will make a conscious choice about how to respond, rather than executing someone else's preferred script. That is the life on the other side of this. A life where your choices are genuinely yours, where the relationships you maintain are maintained by actual desire and genuine value, not by fear or obligation or the slow terror of what someone might do or say or feel. If you finally said what was true, where the work you do is chosen work, not performed compliance, where the version of yourself you present to the world is not the softened, hedged, approval-optimized version that learned to survive in other people's comfort zones, but the actual version with its actual opinions and actual limits and actual power. That version of you exists. It has always existed. It has been managed, modulated, trained into smallness by environments that could not accommodate its full size. But it is there, and it has been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to stop being afraid of the cost of expressing it. The cost is real. Some people will not like the change. Some relationships that depended on your compliance will become uncomfortable or end. Some environments that were built around your availability will push back hard, and you will feel the pull in those moments to retreat, to return to the familiar posture, to explain and soften and reinsert yourself into the comfortable cage. That moment of pull is the final test of everything described here. And the only response that builds something lasting is to stay. Not aggressively, not with performance, just to stay, to hold the position, to remain yourself fully in the face of the pressure to disappear, because the life you actually want, the autonomy, the respect, the relationships of genuine depth, the work of genuine meaning, the inner quiet that comes from not constantly managing other people's perceptions of you, all of that lives on the other side of that moment. Now you know what is happening around you, you know what has been happening, you know what to look for and what to name and how to respond. The only question left is whether you're going to use it. Not someday, not when things are more settled. Now in the next conversation that tries to move you off center, in the next moment that asks you to shrink, in the next person who needs you to be less so they can be more. The power was always yours. You were simply persuaded, very effectively, to keep handing it back. Stop.